Hey guys, I'm Keno47, aka Wolfkeen, and welcome to another edition of my My Little Pony Vlogs. Today I'm talking about Swarm of the Century done by M.A. Larson. This episode, I'm not going to say anything about it right away, but I am going to get into the concept of it. Basically what happens is Fluttershy goes out picking flowers because Celestia is going to be making a visit to Ponyville. And even though it's supposed to be a casual visit, Twilight is making this like way overblown than it needs to be. By having signs, flowers watered all over the place, preparation, everything. I understand royalty's coming, but it's supposed to be a casual visit. Not a royal meeting or anything like that. I don't know. But then Fluttershy runs across this weird creature. I don't know if it's an insect or an animal, And so, Fluttershy decides to bring it back to Ponyville to show it off to her friends. But to her friends. And so, basically, that's when we see the preparations going on between Ponyville and stuff like that. Twilight overseeing them like she did with the Summer Sun celebration. And, of course, Fluttershy finally catches up with Twilight and Pinkie Pie. And she shows off what she has. But for some reason, she has 3 of them now. Like, you remember at the beginning of the episode, she only had 1, and then she had 3. So then we move on to this part where, like, they're trying to figure out what they are, and Twilight decides to take one mainly for Spike, just so Spike will have a companion and will leave Twilight alone. Okay? But then when they ask Pinkie Pie if she wants one, she says, black, a Parasprite, no thanks, and then leaves, and then says she needs to go get a trombone. So we know right here now that Pinkie Pie does in fact know what they are, but she hasn't given us much information. So we move on to other of the main 6 where Twilight is showing this Parasprite basically to Rarity and Rainbow Dash now, who are basically preparing dresses, and ugh. The dress that Rarity's making Rainbow Dash wear just looks horrible. Maybe that's me. So what happens here is that same thing like last time. Twilight had 1 Parasprite and it became 3. And basically, Rainbow Dash takes 1, Rarity takes 1, and Pinkie Pie comes in looking for more instruments and stuff like that. And we'll just keep moving on. Like, I'm not going to get into these details too much. So what happens next is that the very next morning, for some reason, these Parasprites are multiplying numbers. Like, when Twilight wakes up, they're all over her bed, they're all over her house and other stuff like that. They're, like, everywhere. There's, like, hundreds of them. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And we see this in every aspect. Twilight is having a problem with them. Rainbow Dash is having a problem with them. Rarity's having a problem with them. And they're all going to Fluttershy to see if she has any details on this matter. Like if there's any way she can help. And Fluttershy is also knee deep in this situation, like having problems and stuff like that. Makes sense, I guess, because, I don't know. Fluttershy's never seen one before, so I'm pretty sure she doesn't know much about them. So, of course, we keep moving around, and then Applejack comes around and basically shows that, gives Fluttershy apples, wondering why she needs so many. And then they get this idea to herd these Parasprites into the forest and get them out of here. Which, smart idea, yes. And, of course, we get the joke, na 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 katamari damasi. You know I had to do that. So after they get them out of the fort, they get them into the forest and stuff like that. When Fluttershy goes back home and opens the door, bam, more Parasprites. Why? Because she wanted to keep one because of it being cute. And one thing I keep forgetting is that during this entire time, Pinkie Pie is, getting instruments, asking for instruments and stuff like that. Like when they were putting the Parasprites into the forest, Pinkie Pie was chasing them down, asking for maracas and other stuff like that. So now with the Parasprites in Fluttershy's home again, and they said they can't do this again, they just Rainbow Dash decides to make a tornado on her own and decides to try to get rid of them that way. Which, to some extent, works, because she did have them, but then Pinkie Pie comes with symbols, and the symbols get taken from her, and nearly hit Rainbow Dash, causing her to lose control of the tornado, and the Parasprites to go to Ponyville. And now their friends are starting to and now the remain five are angry at Pinkie Pie, saying that she's ruining their attempt to stop this. And Pinkie Pie's trying to explain, I'm not doing this intentionally. I'm trying to help you, as a matter of fact. But they don't listen, basically. But the thing is, here's the problem that I have with this episode. Pinkie Pie never explains how she knows about these animals, or insects, whatever they are, and never explains why she's collecting instruments. She doesn't. She never explains. That was one issue I did have with the episode. The episode does have some good humor. Like, there have been some good humor parts. Like, if you saw the part where the Parasprites were messing with Rainbow Dash, they made a beard go on her like this. And, of course, you can come up with other jokes like that, which I'm not going to go into. But what happens next is that the Parasprites get into Ponyville and they begin eating all the food in Ponyville. Applejack decides to do priority first and heads to Sweet Apple Acres to protect their apple orchard. Understandable, yes, because, you don't want your apple orchard to get infested, basically. So what basically happens next is Twilight decides to try to cast a spell that will prevent them from eating the food, which at a point seems to work, but instead of eating food, they begin eating everything else. They begin eating signs, they begin eating wood, they begin eating books and other stuff like that. Like, they're eating everything else except food. And even Rainbow Dash comes up with a smart remark, like, well, they're not eating the food anymore. And Rarity goes to, her boutique to try to protect her clothing. And, of course, this leads to her just going onto a stool and screaming for bloody mercy. And then Pinkie Pie comes in like, I'll save you, having this determined face, goes right past Rarity, takes the flute, and then leaves. And then you have Rarity just screaming at the top of her lungs. I was like, Pinkie, can you please explain what you're doing? Then we move on to Applejack and her family basically trying to defend the orchard against the Parasprites, basically. And this is where we did get a funny scene, where instead of eating the apples, they ate the barn. How many times has that barn been destroyed in the series My Little Pony? Like, honestly, how many times has it been destroyed so far? I'm kind of lost count. I think this is number one. After they did that, everyone had faces like, and even Applejack said, didn't see that coming. That got a good laugh out of me. So, of course, we kept moving on through the episode, and pretty much there's not a lot they can do. They're already screwed beyond belief. As a matter of fact, to the point where Twilight finally snaps and basically starts trying to come up with plans altogether. Like, Rainbow Dash, just distract the Parasprites. Everybody else, we need to create an exact copy of Ponyville right over there. We have less than a minute. I think everyone made this joke, the Patrick joke that he made in SpongeBob. He was like, how about we take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else? I think everybody made that joke on that one. Before that scene, though, of course, Twilight went to Zecora, which, okay, we got some continuity there, thank you. And Zecora knows what they are, and pretty much tells them they're freaking screwed. So, of course, Twilight hears music, who she thinks is Celestia's royal procession, and it's Pinkie Pie playing like 10 instruments at once, playing like a harmonica, a trombone, cymbals, and other stuff like that. And you're just hearing like this catchy beat, and while she's playing this beat, the Parasprites are actually moving in tune with her and are actually into the music and actually begin following Pinkie Pie. So Pinkie Pie gathers all the Parasprites, begins walking them out into the forest, and Celestia comes in right when that happens. Of course, the Remain Five go to meet the Parasprites, and I'm at Celestia, and when Celestia sees the freaking Parasprite parade pass by, I'm like, oh, they're so busted. Like, I was like, oh, they're so busted. I was laughing my ass off there, because, honestly, that was a funny scene. Like, you see Twilight, like, looking at it, everybody was looking at it like, oh, no. And then Twilight tries to keep talking, like, so how was the trip? Hit much traffic? Like, trying to keep a straight face. Like, all of the main five are trying to keep a straight face here. And it's funny as hell because, can you imagine that if you screwed up a situation royally and you're just trying your best to keep a good face even though the situation is screwed, basically? And, of course, for some reason, an infestation happened in Philadelphia, which a lot of people assumed was the parasprites that they sent through the forest. Could be. So, of course, Celestia asks, did Twilight learn anything? And, of course, is to believe in your friends even when they don't make sense. Like, to always never give up hope on your friends. Which is a good lesson. That is a good lesson. So, Celestia leaves. Pinkie Pie drives out the rest of the parasprites. And we pretty much find out why Pinkie Pie was getting all these instruments. Finally, because, well, she needed these instruments to get the parasprites out of there. And she knew what they were. And I just love some of the lines they said. Like, Twilight saying, "You're a good friend, even if you don't make sense." And I think Pinkie Pie said, "Thanks, Twilight. I think so, too. Even when I don't make sense." And I was like, that's a great way to pander yourself a little bit. But I do that myself, so... meh. And of course they say they saved Ponyville, and in reality the town is destroyed. And of course at the end Pinkie Pie does the... and I just laughed at that because I was like, yeah, that was perfect. Swarm of the Century. I like this episode. After watching it, I like this episode. It could have been paced a little bit better in some areas, and I did like some of the visuals of this episode. Twilight using her magic, the tornado, the Katamari Damacy little thing that we saw, and the design of the parasprites was kind of interesting as well. The humor was pretty good too. There was a lot of good humor elements in there as well, including some of the later parts. What only annoyed me about this episode, though, was Pinkie Pie not explaining what they were, what the parasprites were, and stuff like that. Other than that, this was a fun episode to watch. This is a fun episode to watch. I don't have any problems with this episode whatsoever. So yeah, fun episode. But the next one, oh my god, I cannot wait to freaking talk about this episode. So until next time, guys, I'm Keen947, aka Wolfkeen, and I'll see you all for the next My Little Pony vlog. So until next time, take care.